I am recording also. So, welcome everybody. This will be the first in a hopefully long, drawn out, painful, and fun series of discussions between myself and my good friend Ferb, who we will sometimes refer to as Tim. Most of you may know me as Aaron, and if not, then so be it. You now know. So this is welcome to Pandemic Assholes. I just said pandemic. It is pedantic. It's pedantic assholes. Welcome to Pedantic Assholes, where we explore literally everything under the sun and we pick things apart in sometimes fun ways, sometimes irritating, like semantic assholes to the point of being irritating. That's where we get the name Pedantic Assholes. So, welcome everybody to our first official discussion. This is a pre-recorded because our new channel is yet to achieve 100 subscribers, and we do intend to go live very soon. So if you're checking us out for the first time, give us a subscription, help us hit that 100 subscriber mark, and we'll start doing this stuff live. And we hope to have guests. Hopefully, we're going to start reaching out to philosophers and other theologian type people, people who are into philosophy and into these kind of discussions of societal issues, theological issues, philosophical issues. And we're just a bunch of armchair philosophers that we are, and we're going to have some fun. We have a lot, and by the way, I can't wait to introduce you to the toe stomper. This is a big deal. But we're not going to do the toe stomper today. Today we're going to start with axioms. I'll introduce you to my good friend Ferb. Ferb, Tim, say hello and let's get this thing going.
Hello. So I figured we'd probably start with classical logic and the presuppositions involved with that, and then talk about other presuppositional frameworks and how those relate to one another, and how people using these different presuppositional frameworks often come to disagreements that arguably can't be overcome easily or at all.
Or at all. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Very good. Anything else you want to add before we get into our discussion today?
I think that's about it. I think we should just jump right into defining some of the words that we probably we're probably using a bit too much, like presuppositions. We should probably define that.
Go ahead. Floor is yours.
Okay. So I'm just gonna look up a a definition right away because
Listen to this
I
guy
don't have
type.
software, so I'm gonna
Listen
do
to
it
this
for
guy
you.
type. It sounds like dropping M&Ms on a coffee table.
All right. So a presupposition. Let's see here.
Do you want to
A
share your screen?
postulation. Yeah, sure. Let's see here.
Yeah, whenever possible, let's go ahead and share a screen so people can read. They can pause the video if they want to.
Yeah. All right. So
And
you've got my screen
and
here.
here it comes. Let me go full screen for you. I've got you.
Okay. So I think this should be it. Yeah, it should be this.
Can you expand that a little bit for the a little bit
Yeah,
small on my
absolutely.
end? I've got you full screen. Cool. There you go. Nice.
So essentially, it's kind of an axiom. It's what you, at least in reference to what we're describing here, it's something that you begin with before you make other conclusions.
So an
And so
axiom
you can't.
so an
Oh, go ahead.
axiom is an agreed upon conclusion, right? Can
Well, it
we
doesn't necessarily have to be agreed upon. Like you
well
can have your own private axiom framework, but
so
yeah, usually it is an
let's
agreed
go
upon
ahead and
thing.
define axiom because it's not one of those
Yeah, sure.
words that are embedded in the vernacular. Not everybody understands what an axiom is.
Yeah. So there is okay. One of the definitions is a lot closer to what you were describing.
A self-evident or universally recognized truth. And
The
it's
reason I didn't want to say that it's like an established rule is because there's such a thing as non-classical logic, which we're probably going to get into,
yeah,
and
eventually. Let's
yeah,
hope.
that's going to be interesting. Yeah, but
So,
before we explore that, where do you want to go from here?
well, I just want to make it very clear that when we were referring to axioms, that our audience is up to speed on what an axiom is, because, like I said, it's not common in typical vernacular, most people don't understand that definition. Most people that I know don't. If literally anybody I know, person to person, if I said what's an define axiom, they probably couldn't do it.
That's yeah, yeah. It's I think a good representation of this is something like geometry postulates, where it's kind of like fundamental principles that you use to apply to other things.
But you use them
And
because they're universally accepted. Most people would, in the field at
most of the
least,
time, yes.
right? Most
Yeah,
people in the field at least would accept them as a truth.
right, exactly. And they've been, you could say they've been demonstrated to be true via predictions, via being able to do certain things over and over again, all of that. But of course, that's all based on classical logic. So this is
Yeah,
this is basically a more fundamental
right,
variation on
right,
this idea.
right. So we're starting from the beginning here. Let's just build a
Yes,
foundation. So
the
when we
very beginning. Yes,
okay, so we're literally building a foundation. So when we refer to axioms, we're literally talking about an accepted, quote unquote, accepted truth.
correct.
Something that's widely accepted as being true. That doesn't
Or
mean
yeah,
that doesn't mean that you can't challenge it, right? An outsider can't come
right.
along and say, "Wait a minute, I see a flaw." That's not what that means. But an axiom is something that is widely accepted as being true.
It's basically just a fundamental rule which you're using to come to other conclusions,
Okay.
other significant
All right.
conclusions anywhere in the
All right.
world.
Cool. Moving on.
Right. So moving on from that, do you want to jump right into classical logic and describe some of the basically the three main presuppositions involved there?
Sure.
Okay. So firstly, we've got basically uh, let me see here. These three are the main ones. Law of identity, which is basically, whatever x happens to be, we're setting a variable here. Whatever x happens to be, it can't not be equal to itself. It has to be equal to itself. So
Whoa, whoa,
whatever
whoa, whoa.
something is,
Wait, wait, wait.
it is that thing.
Do you want to say that again? It can't be equal
Sure.
to itself. It has to be equal to itself. I'm sorry.
No, it can't not be equal to itself. I was
Okay.
using a double negative there.
All right. Okay.
So yeah, it can't be like something other than what it is.
Okay.
It's, a pretty self evident idea, but of course it can be rejected in various ways. Um, but I mean, to come to a lot of common conclusions on the world, I think the vast majority of people would agree on that.
Okay.
And then the second one is the law of non-contradiction, which is essentially this: something cannot be both true and false. Something can't be one and two. It's just if something is one thing, it can't be something else at the same time.
So
Actually, no, that would be law of excluded middle, I think.
so
I think I'm
that
conflating
would
authority.
wouldn't that fall into the category of cognitive dissonance that people typically that we you hear a lot of cognitive people throw that word around, cognitive dissonance, where people are holding two contradictory positions at the same time.
Right.
So the law of
Yeah, that
non-contradiction would fall under that category of cognitive dissonance.
right. So cognitive dissonance is basically a case where someone is breaking that rule, usually unknowingly.
Right. Good. Good. Okay. Moving on.
So, right, this would be this.
Go ahead and lay us a good old foundation, and we're going to have some great conversations after this. And by the way, I want to reiterate, I can't wait to introduce you guys to the Toe Stomper. This is a hilarious and insightful conversation that Ferb and I had, and it really gets to the heart of some of the societal issues that we are facing today. It's great, 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 great stuff. It's hilarious, it's funny, it's insightful. I can't wait to introduce you to the Toe Stomper, but we got to lay a foundation first. So go
Yep.
ahead, Ferb, move forward.
Okay, so we've described the law of identity, the law of non-contradiction. Now we're going to describe the law of the excluded middle, which is basically something has to either be true or false. Whatever proposition, whatever conclusion you come to, it has to either be true or false. It cannot be anything between. Of
Okay.
course, from our perspective, it can be something in between. We can say that there's a 50% chance that something's going to occur, and before it actually occurs, something like that. But it cannot be both true and false that that thing is going to occur. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So those are kind of the three uh,
A-
three main
the three
laws of
act.
classical logic as
Can
far
we
as,
say the
yeah,
three axioms?
yes, exactly. The
Okay.
three axioms.
Okay.
The three main axioms of classical logic as far as I know it. Um, and there's some other extensions of that, I believe, but we won't be getting into that a whole lot. So now this is where we get into the fun conflicts between different axiom frameworks, one could say. So there's such a thing as Gödel's incompleteness theorems. And these incompleteness theorems basically state that any finite set, I should say, or finite system of axioms, or I guess kind of postulates, things that are built off of one another to come to what would consider truths,
Yep.
has to have one thing that isn't supported by anything else. One variable or one conclusion, whatever you want to call it, one axiom that just isn't supported by anything else. I guess an axiom wouldn't fit for everything because axiom would be like a fundamental rule. But you get the idea there. So there has to be at least one axiom, one fundamental rule which isn't supported by anything else. Does that make sense?
Um, I'm a little bit confused because you're saying isn't supported by anything else.
Correct.
There has to be one thing in Gödel's incompleteness theorem. So, in Gödel's incompleteness theorem, if we do find some one thing that is not consistent, what does that tell us?
Well, it's not so much that when we find something that isn't supported, it tells us something else. This is just describing the fact that there will be one thing that's not supported, unless, of course, we we give up the idea that circularity is a problem. Um, you could come up with a circular idea for like a finite framework, but that would be very problematic, as you can imagine, because basically saying logic is good because logic,
Right.
and you can't do that.
Matt Slick, everyone. In
But that's fine in a way too, because he's using different axioms. And he's using basically a non-classical logical approach. And this is where it gets very interesting, because we can't really use our epistemic framework. And right, we should probably define that as well. An epistemic framework is kind of a synonym for an axiom framework, because it's basically how we come to things that we know. And an axiom framework is kind of, the foundational things which we use to come to things
so,
we know.
so for the kids in the back of the room,
Yes.
an epistemic framework is based on the word epistemology, which is basically means how do you know what you know, or
Right,
how do you
exactly.
know what you claim to know? It's epistemology, right?
Epistemology is all about the study of knowledge, all about, yeah, exactly,
Just
how we come to things we know, what methods were used, what justification we have for our beliefs, all of that.
okay. So when you say epistemic, that is based on epistemology. That's that word epistemology. So
Exactly.
I just want to
Yes.
get the kids in the back of the class to be engaged. That's all. I just want to make
Right, right.
sure that those people that might be listening who are we're throwing out big words, right? And
Right, right.
I don't want to pretend like we're sounding smart, but we are familiar with these words and definitions. I want to make sure that other people are as well. That's all.
Yeah, it's only a shortening of a bunch of different words into one singular word for, quick discussion on deep subjects. That's all it is. So, yeah, let's get into some non-classical logic. Um, how many people do you think are going to be familiar with presuppositional apologetics?
How many people? Like,
Yeah, or what ratio, I guess.
I would say 10 to 15%, maybe 20
All
at
right.
best, because most people don't really get into epistemology. They don't get a pre. I mean, if you're familiar with presuppositional apologetics, then you're the kind of person who is either a religious person who's interested in theology and theological debates, or you're an atheist who's also interested in theology and theological debates. Other than that, I'm going to guess nobody else is familiar with presuppositional apologetics.
And I would agree there. I think that's correct. And so, yeah, presuppositional apologetics, commonly known as presuppositionalism, is basically the idea that you replace classical logical axioms with a belief that the Bible, the Christian Holy Bible, and Jesus Christ, and that whole entire religious system, whatever version of it you happen to subscribe to, is correct. You presuppose that fact before you come to any logical conclusions on it. That's your first fundamental thing, and
So
then maybe you apply classical logic on top of that, but that's afterwards.
so again, for the kids in the back, presuppositional apologetics. The word presuppositional, it is embedded a word called presuppose. So we
Right,
we
right.
have to presuppose. We have to suppose beforehand that this
Hmm.
one quote unquote axiom, this thing is true. That's
Right,
presuppositional. So we presuppose this thing is true without any proof or evidence. It's just a quote unquote it's a given, right?
right.
We just
Exactly,
accept it as a given.
exactly. And everyone, as you know, as far as we know, that of course this is debated in philosophy, but the argument that me and Rufus are making is that everybody has to start with at least one presupposition and work off of that framework or build a framework from that axiom. And so these people are only basically replacing classical logic with a different presuppositional framework.
So, all right,
Um,
before we go there, what is the one thing that everybody has to presuppose?
I don't think there is
Are we
one thing that everyone has to presuppose.
are we going to go with the excuse me if I get this wrong, was it Epicurus? I think therefore I am. Who said that?
No, no, that was Rene Descartes.
Descartes. Descartes. Yeah, yeah.
Descartes. Okay.
Descartes. I think therefore I am. That's a presupposition, right?
Mm, it's phrased as if it's like there's a premise and then there's a conclusion. There's the premise, I think. There's the conclusion, I am. So it seems to be based on other axioms, other logical axioms, which would validate that sort of, premise, conclusion, um, I guess, framework of speech.
So is it
It's,
true? Is it true that Descartes' phrase "I think therefore I am"? Is it true that that is a presupposition?
I don't, I don't think so. I think it would be built on other presuppositions implicit to that saying. However, it has been used as kind of a presupposition, for instance, by people like T Jump. But it's kind of, I don't know. They seem to use logic without recognizing that they are using logic. In my opinion, I could be wrong there.
Well, I was going to ask, what example could you give me that would not fall in that category? If you
Um,
were to conclude, I think, therefore I am, how could you conclude that without a presupposition of some kind?
I'm not arguing that you could conclude that without a presupposition of some kind. I think you would have to have a presupposition. I just don't think it in itself is a presupposition.
I see.
I think it implies other presuppositions in order for it to be valid or mean anything.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
I think, therefore I. Okay, go ahead. No, go ahead. I think, therefore I am. Descartes. Cogito ergo sum explained.
I honestly don't know. I just opened up a random tab.
No, that's fine.
Is looking it up.
No, that's fine. This is what we do. We're doing this organically. This is not pre-planned. It's not
Yeah.
scripted. That's fine. This is where we get,
I suppose I could.
after a few minutes, this is where it gets fun. After Ferb and I get into conversation, a few minutes later, it really starts to get fun.
This is true. We've got to be careful here though, because we could get into a lot of subjects that we probably want to save for another show.
Yeah, yeah.
But we could briefly touch on a lot of different
We're
subjects.
trying to stay within a framework for this particular recording, but for the most part, once we get going, who knows where we wind up. Like the toe stomper. I mean, the toe stomper is like brilliant. It's brilliant, and I can't wait to get and maybe for our second episode we can do toe stomper. I'm anxious to get into the toe stomper because I think, you know, for the audience, this is where Ferb and I really decided we should start recording or creating like a whole separate channel for this particular topic because
Yes.
the toe stomper, just as a really quick preamble, The toe stomper came about when Ferb and I were discussing societal issues as to when the question was, when should society as a whole decide to kill a person, right? Somebody who's a criminal, right? When do we
When,
decide?
if ever.
If ever, right? When, if
Yeah,
ever, should society decide that this person is such a detriment on society that putting them in prison isn't working? It's more of a negative uh, consequence to society. And when should we just go ahead and say, you know what, we don't need you anymore, dead, right? When do we
right.
make that decision? And then we had this long drawn out conversation, and it led to the toe stomper, which I can't wait to get into. But for now, we'll leave that aside.
Yeah.
So go ahead and go back to logical absolutes, and why don't you explain that thoroughly? Give me about 30 seconds, and I'll be right back.
All right. So using this kind of fundamental framework, we come to conclusions on virtually every major subject that you can possibly think of. Um, for example, the law, like you can't really come to a conclusion on anything. You can't accept that gravity holds you down without accepting that gravity does not also pull you up, or at least it seems that way intuitively. And of course, you could argue that's based on our neurology, and you could argue that, but again, you're almost using logic to make an argument like that. So it becomes very meta very quickly, and it's difficult to escape that sort of framework. But of course, people try, and at times it can explain things which the normal logical framework cannot. That doesn't mean those alternative frameworks are more accurate. However, it's interesting nonetheless. I should probably explain Gödel's incompleteness theorems to a greater degree. Right. I don't have the actual text immediately in front of me. I could probably pull it up though. 1 second.
All right, I'm back.
Link.
All right, I'm back.
Welcome back. I've been trying to pull something up. Right. This is it. Now I go here.
We got to come back to Gödel's incompleteness theorem. I really
Yeah,
want.
that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm doing.
All right.
This had a good kind of, I don't know, a good summary of that, I think. But it's kind of long, and I'm not entirely sure where that summary was, so this is going to be a bit difficult. But basically, the idea is that you cannot, with any finite system, you cannot avoid circularity and have have a system that's not based on at least one rule, which isn't supported by any other.
So it's a presup.
It forces you to make a presupposition. Yeah.
Give me an example. Can you give us an example?
Yes. How I'm gonna have to think of one off the spot. I guess if you're going to I don't know, make a truth statement, any truth statement at all. It can be
Um,
literally anything.
the Earth revolves around. Re- the Earth orbits the sun.
Okay, how do you know that?
Um,
So an epistemic question.
personal observation. I know it through personal observation.
And how do you justify that personal observation?
Oh, you're playing Matt Slick, aren't you? No, that's
Well,
fine. No, that's
really,
fine.
yeah,
No,
yeah.
no, no, no. That's fine. That's fine. That's exactly what I wanted. I'm just teasing. Um, yeah, that's what Max Slick does. He's like, how do you know that? Well, how do you know that? Well, how do you know that? That's Matt
Right,
Slick.
he's not wrong to ask this question.
No, no, he's not wrong. I'll admit openly he's not wrong to ask those questions. Those are legitimate questions, and he ultimately, a presup like Matt Slick will boil it down to the point where you have to admit you're stuck. You have to
Right.
admit that you have to presuppose at least one thing, which brings us back to Descartes, right? I think therefore I am, which is where Tom Jump is going to go. Uh oh. Uh oh. I lost Ferb.
Briefly disconnected there. I'm back.
So basically, this is where T-jump winds up. Matt Slick will boil it down to where you're forced to admit, like Descartes, I think therefore I am, right? Which is where T-jump likes to go,
Yeah.
and that is an acknowledged presupposition. You simply must presuppose that I exist. Otherwise, we fall into solipsism, right? Otherwise, we're brains in vats.
Well, I mean, even that kind of that's a bit of a separate issue because even if you
Uh oh.
don't,
Hang on. Pardon me. Give me a second.
all right,
My wife just got home. A little unexpected. Go ahead, Ferb.
all right. So essentially, if you don't accept that, like you don't have to accept that this conclusion because it kind of follows from a classical logical framework. It gets a bit meta because we're from one specific framework, we're concluding that you can't have a framework on other things, but from another perspective, from another framework of different axioms, you could probably conclude that you could actually have a finite set of these variables that aren't based on anything, that aren't based on any, or rather are based on their own.
They
I'm
got
not
to be
explaining
based
this
on.
well.
No, you're not. They got to be based on something.
I mean, if you want to avoid circularity, yes, but you don't necessarily have to subscribe to the idea that circularity is bad. Is my
Circularity.
point.
I would. Oh well, convince me because I would say circularity is bad.
The problem is, well, the
This
thing
this
is,
is
I
why
could
we're
turn it around
pedantic
on you and
assholes
say that.
because we can't have a conversation without defining every fucking word.
Oh yeah, okay, okay. So
So come on,
you're
tell.
saying that
So go ahead and tell me why. So let's start. Tell me why circularity is not bad.
because I don't think there isn't really an inherent reason that's not based on our specific agreed upon presuppositional framework that states that it is bad. So, like from my perspective, I think it is bad, but you don't necessarily. So I guess like I wouldn't say that you have to accept it. And
So no. So that's subjective. No, you're entering the one. No, 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 no. We want to stay in the realm of objectivism, right? We want to stay away from personal. I think this. I feel that kind of realm.
well, the problem is we can't really move out of our perspective because if we do so, we lose all foundation for things like language, for logical discussion, because that's all based on the three basic principles, three basic logical principles. So to move out of that area already moves out of our own presuppositional framework, and there's no like how could you really do that without selecting another specific presuppositional framework? It seems impossible to me.
So what you're saying is it's impossible to get away from presuppositionalism.
Yes.
Okay, you should put a call into Matt Slick right away. He
Well,
he he
okay.
probably has a position on his payroll for you. Just teasing.
I should clarify by presuppositionalism, I don't mean Christian presuppositional apologetics. I mean, any sort of
Well,
presuppositional framework.
even philosophical presuppositionalism is, I
Right,
mean,
right.
you still have we're still trying to get to the heart of can we get away from presupposition. I don't know,
Exactly.
is it even possible to get away from presupposing at least one thing, like the Descartes, right? I think therefore I am. Is there anything more rudimentary than that?
Right, right.
I don't know that there is.
Well, one could say that to come to the conclusion that you are from the premise that you think, you have to accept some logic there.
Even as a solipsist, you cannot conclude that I think therefore I am is foundational, right? Because even if you're a solipsist, you could very well be a brain in a vat. And just because you think that you think doesn't mean that you am, right?
Well, you T-Jump would classically argue that you would still be, you would just be a brain in a vat instead of being what you thought you were, but you would still be. And he argues that it's impossible for you to think if you are not be, you know?
I suppose, but I mean, even if you think that you might very well be a brain in a vat. And furthermore, you might not be an actual brain. You might actually be a computer chip who thinks that you think.
True. But then, of
Now,
course,
I've
we get into the distinction between a brain and a computer chip.
right. So I've argued against solipsism by saying that even if I am a brain in a vat, when I bump my elbow, it still hurts. So I still have to
That's
live under those rules.
right. That's not an argument against solipsism. That's more so an argument against the consequences of solipsism being that life is subjectively meaningless.
Oh, subjectively meaningless. No, I wouldn't say that it's subjectively meaningless. It's subjectively
Right,
meaningful.
that's my point. Like you're saying that it's subjectively meaningful with this argument, because solipsists often conclude that subjectively it's meaningless, and that's what your argument does. It doesn't. It's not really an argument against solipsism because you're saying even if solipsism is true, blah blah blah.
Sure. So even if solipsism is true,
I'm just being a pedantic asshole.
it still hurts I still feel pain. I still experience some experience of pain when I bang my elbow.
Right. Therefore, subjective meaning.
Subjective meaning. Even if I'm a
Yeah.
brain in a vat, I still experience the pain of banging my elbow. So I still have to
Right.
live
Right.
under those rules of whatever system I'm under.
Yeah.
So can we not conclude that I think therefore I am is still valid under that condition?
Um. Yeah. I think you would be able to conclude that it's still valid there,
Okay.
as long as you accept the classical logic.
Okay. Okay. And by the way, for the listener, we're going to get into free will real quick.
Oh yeah.
We always devolve, and I say devolve because
We
these
always evolve to free will discussions.
evolve, devolve. What's the fucking difference? Hey, oh, hey, bing,
We
bang, boom.
transition.
It always comes back to free will. Always, always. We're always going to wind up in that conversation, and
It's true.
which is interesting and fun. All right, so
Yeah.
go ahead, move forward.
All right. Well, we can get into the conflicts between different presuppositional frameworks. We could do that. So, like, how do you, if you're arguing with someone who works with a different presuppositional system, what is the best strategy to kind of to work with them? Is there a strategy? I think those are questions we should address in this show.
Okay,
So, firstly, we've got to we've got to address the fact that anything that they presuppose, you can't really use your own presuppositional system, which contradicts theirs, to argue against it, unless your presuppositional framework somehow. Even then, though, you wouldn't be able to. You can't use. So, for instance, if we both use logic, we both use foundational logical principles. We can't use foundational logical principles to argue against Matt Slick's presuppositional system.
correct.
I would argue,
I th- I,
in a way which would apply to his perspective.
I think you're right, and I've listened to enough Matt Slick debates. I believe that you're correct on this.
It's a
He
very unfortunate thing, but
he's
yeah,
it's a very slippery slope, especially if you're a fan of Matt Slick or if you're a fan of listening to the guy debate or someone debate against him. Listening to his version of debate tactic using presuppositionalism, it's really hard to get around.
yeah. I think the only real way you could actually change someone's presuppositional framework is if you could demonstrate that they weren't actually using that in a subconscious level. If you could bring about like a basically a different epistemic framework or axiomatic framework, whatever, from the depths of their subconscious and show their consciousness that actually there's another framework that makes more sense for you to apply. I think that's the only way. And in that case, they wouldn't have actually been using the presuppositional framework which they thought they were using. You see what I mean? So if they're actually really using a different presuppositional framework, there's nothing you can really do as far as that framework goes. Now, they might They might apply the three basic logical principles above the thing that they presuppose, and then there might be subjects beyond that which you can both debate just fine. But anything below that is going to be problematic, most likely.
So you can't get around presuppositionalism unless
Yes.
unless you can show the presuppositionalist that their logic of presuppositionalism is flawed to begin with. Is it,
Right. And the only way you could really do that is to show that they haven't been using it. Because
oh,
you can't like logically show it beyond proving that they're using logic without knowing that they're using logic. You know what I mean?
okay. So this is actually, I think this is useful. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah.
okay, how to defeat a presuppositionalist. That might be the title of our show. So, how to defeat a presuppositionalist is to literally show that the precept that they are using is not, in fact, valid.
Well, no, it's not that the one that they're consciously using is invalid. It's that they're not actually using what they think they're using. If you can show that, if you can show that, somewhere along their thinking process, they're actually taking from a different presuppositional framework, then, you've done it. And that's why a lot of presuppositional apologetic people try to prove that atheists and other people like that use basically take from the God presupposition. And they'll try to prove that various ways. And I have not been convinced, but you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I would just argue that I think it's the same thing. I mean,
Same thing, how?
well, I mean, if you can show a presuppositionalist that the precept that they're using in the way that I framed it, that it's not valid, and in the way that you framed it, that the precept that they're using is not the precept that they think that they're using. That's the same as not being valid.
Not necessarily, because this is basically how to convert a presuppositionalist to your version of presupposition. Um,
I
that doesn't necessarily say that's valid.
pardon me. Okay, sorry. All right, go ahead. Say that again. Just say that again.
So
This is where it gets fun.
you're not necessarily showing that your point of view is valid. You're only showing that they're using your presuppositional framework and thus converting them to that presuppositional framework. You're not,
You're
it doesn't
converting.
necessarily prove that it's
So
valid.
so you're talking
Right,
about
right.
converting a precept to your precept, not not
Correct.
not the precept that they thought they were using. That
Right,
they're
right.
actually using someone else's precept.
Hmm.
Okay, interesting. Very interesting. I'm not.
Everyone's a precept at the end of the day.
I suppose. I mean, even T jump refers to Descartes all the time, right?
Yep.
That's his back foot. When you put T jump on his back leg or on his heel or whatever, however that phrase is. That's what he falls back on, right? That's his fallback position. I think, therefore, I am.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
And
we've
he admits,
exhausted all of our planned
and if
material.
I'm not mistaken, T jump admits that Descartes is a precept.
Does he? I haven't seen that, but maybe.
I think that he does. Don't hold me to it. I'm pretty sure that he does.
Fair enough.
I'm pretty sure that that's his fallback, and he admits that that is a precept. You have to admit that I presuppose that I think, and you presuppose therefore I am. That
I
is,
think he would argue that that's not a presupposition, but I might be wrong.
well, we look forward to having T Jump on the show because he can certainly show up and, without a blink of an eye, tell us why we're wrong. That's what he's good at.
Should be interesting for sure.
We're going to be reaching out to Tom Jump anytime soon, and we would love to have him come and tell us why we're wrong. He's great. We love T Jump.
Definitely.
Um, and I don't know if I ever explained to you as a little tangent, and I don't want to get into too many tangents. I want to keep this, concise and timely. But
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I told you that I spoke with not I didn't speak with him directly. He was doing a live stream like AMA kind of a thing, and I asked
Hmm.
him. I thought that I had a rock solid foundation for um, what was it? An
Was it ethics being subjective?
objective morality. I thought that I had a rock solid objective morality argument.
I
And
thought it was the other way around, where he was saying objective morality was the case, and you were counter arguing that. But I might be wrong because
I,
you've told me this before.
well, I personally came up with the idea of that we have mirror neurons, right?
Yeah.
And that we have these things in our brains that exist without our conscious knowledge.
Right. Yeah. You're right. You're right. I'm wrong.
And I was like, "Hey, T-Jump, is it not possible that objective morality exists because of mirror neurons? And I don't have a choice. I have these things in my brain called mirror neurons that help me feel and empathize with other people, right?
Right.
Without my knowledge, right? Without any sort of pre-education or anything like that." And
Hmm.
and he corrected me, and I think I learned something that objectivism actually involves not having humans at all, right? So an objective truth doesn't involve human beings. It's true whether humans even exist. that I think that's the argument he was going for.
Right. Yeah. Well,
So
yeah. You're right
right,
because it
so
has to be independent of mind.
it's correct, independent of mind, right?
Right. Right. I think objectivism is the wrong word there, though. I think that's Ayn Rand.
Oh,
um,
don't
I
associate me
can
with Ayn
hang on,
Rand,
hang on.
at least not now.
I hang on, hang on. The word, it's the word here. I can show you what I mean. Objective.
Oh, Atlas.
Yeah. So I think that's not the technical term for it, but I'm not entirely sure what the technical term is. It might just be objective morality.
Well, just to get back to the point real quick, as far as I understand, T Jump sticks to the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy definition of objectivism, which, as you mentioned already, exists without mind, right? So it
Um,
doesn't require a mind. It exists whether minds are here to observe or think about or not. Objective morality is the sun exists, the earth goes around the sun. It doesn't even require human beings to be true, right? Nobody has to think about it. It's just a thing that happens. That's objective.
right. Ethical and aesthetic norms and values in general.
So, as far as I understand, objectivism has absolutely nothing to do with a mind at all. That's the way I understood his explanation. When he shot me down, because I thought I had a rock solid objective morality, like mirror neurons, right? I've got these things, these little things in my brain that give me a sense of morality because I can feel empathy. The mirror neurons help me understand how it feels to be someone who gets, if I'm watching a video and somebody gets knocked in the balls, I go, ouch, right? That's like,
Right.
to me, that's objective, but it's not objective. And T Jump was like, nope, I'm sorry, that's not objective.
Right. Trivially mind dependent.
There we go, that's better. I can expand that for my audience. I'm the one recording, so absolutism.
All right.
Go ahead. I'm
Hang on.
I just expanded the image that you display.
Oh, okay, okay.
Absolutism, the view that at least some truths or values in the relevant domain apply to all times, places, or social or cultural frameworks. They are universal and not bound by historical or social conditions. Absolutism is often used as the key contrast idea to relativism. Objectivism, or the position that cognitive, which is a thinking mind, right?
Right.
Objectivism, the position that cognitive, ethical, and aesthetic norms and values in general, but truth in particular, are independent of judgments and beliefs. So that would be the same thing as independent of mind, because you need judgment. You need a
Not
mind. You need a
necessarily,
mind to have judgment and belief. It requires a
because
mind, right?
independent, I think actually,
In,
because
in,
let's look at your specific argument, which is that mirror neurons produce that sort of empathy, and that would actually be independent of judgments or beliefs, at least as far as conscious judgments and beliefs go, right? However, it wouldn't be independent of human minds
no,
or
correct.
minds, and
No, it
so
requires a
that would be
mind.
a difference.
It requires a brain. Mirror
Right,
neurons
right,
exist in brains. Minds exist in brains. Minds don't exist outside of brains as far as we know.
right, right.
So I have a
So there would
brain.
actually be a difference.
Yeah, so I think that's where T Jump was drawing the delineation.
Right.
So,
But I think objectivism would still stand with the argument you gave, maybe.
well, I mean, maybe so. We could have that discussion with T Jump. I'd love to parse that out.
Yeah.
But I mean, he fucking shot me down within a blink of an eye. Like maybe he already thought of it, or somebody brought it up already. I don't know. But he was like, "Nope, sorry, nope." I was like, "Damn it! I thought I had something. Damn it!" So, so if objectivism is a position that cognitive or ethical aesthetic norms and values in general, but truth in particular, are independent of judgments and beliefs. Again,
It's a
I,
mouthful, isn't it?
yeah, it is. I have to go back to judgment and belief because you can't have those things without a mind or a brain.
Um, let
I
me
mean,
think.
you could have them in a computer simulation, an AI system, I suppose.
Right, but that would still be a mind.
Would it? Oh.
Well, okay,
Uh-oh.
that's
Oh, you
we got
stepped
to get
into
into
it.
that debate, don't we?
Oh, you got mud on your shoes now. What did you step into?
We should probably save that discussion for
Yeah,
another time.
let's not get into AIism is equal to mind.
Yeah, but let me think. So okay, non-trivially mind independent.
Mind independent. So it's independent of
Um,
minds.
but it's talking about independent
See,
of
this goes
dependence.
back to the
Hang on.
question: if a tree falls in the forest, and there's no one around to hear it, does it make a sound? That's objective, right? Yes, it makes a sound, and you don't have to be there to hear it. It doesn't require a brain to listen to the sound. The sound
Right,
occurs. It occurs. This thing happened, regardless of people being a thing in the universe at all. Maybe there's no humans in the universe at all. A tree fell, and yes, it made a sound. That's objective.
right.
It objectively made a sound. Regardless of whether there was anyone or anything to hear that sound, yes, it made
I
a
mean,
sound.
you could make a solipsist argument and claim that
Ah,
it's all mind
you are a
dependent.
pedantic asshole.
Since that they do not track a realm of judgment independent facts. So okay, the thing you're describing is independent of conscious judgment and beliefs, right?
I'm sorry, say that again. I was reading.
So the thing you were describing with the mirror neurons, that is independent of judgment and beliefs. At least conscious judgment and beliefs, right?
No.
How so?
Well, my mirror neurons activate, you say, independent of judgment or beliefs. I would say that they are the foundation of judgment and belief.
I would agree, but I don't think that contradicts
Well, they're not
being
independent. If they're the foundation, how can they be independent?
because they're not dependent upon the thing which arises out of them.
Hmm. Hmm. I can't wait to listen to you and T Jump have a conversation.
That will be interesting.
I'm just going to sit back and we're going to invite T Jump. He's going to show up because, no offense, if this ever gets back to T Jump, he's a whore. He's kind of a whore. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I really don't. What I mean is he's the kind of guy who will show up almost every time somebody invites him to have a discussion on philosophy or things of these nature. He's that kind of a whore, and that's I I swear I'm only using that word as a definition, not a bad, not a pejorative.
Right.
But I'm pretty sure if we just reach out to T Jump that he will show up at the drop of a hat. He'll be happy to have this discussion. I'm almost certain, and I mean no ill will. I like T Jump. He's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
So okay, let's try to move forward because we're already creeping up on nearly an hour.
Right, right. I'm not entirely sure where to move forward from here.
So we were talking about axioms. We were laying foundations for our upcoming discussions,
Hmm.
and we want to move to a place where we can start talking about the toe stomper. This is like one of the biggest things on my mind right now is the toe stomper.
Well, what all do we need for the toe stomper? I guess we would need to describe ethical frameworks like deontology, utilitarianism, consequentialism. We'd need to get into all of that.
Go ahead and I need another 30 seconds. Go ahead and describe deontology.
Oh boy. Well, I've all right. I'm not entirely sure I'm going to be prepared for this, but I'm going to do it to the best of my ability. Deontology is basically the idea that ethics come from a sense of duty and the rightness of certain actions inherently. So instead of doing something because it ends up having good consequences, which would be consequentialism, deontology would suggest that you should do it because of basically it being the correct thing to do inherently. And usually this is paired with things like the categorical imperative, which is the idea that if you don't want something done in certain situations, then you shouldn't do it. If you want it done in certain situations, universally, it's sorry, I should clarify that further. If you want something done universally, then you should do it. If you don't want something done universally, you shouldn't do it. And what universally means is that you try to you try to imagine what would happen if everyone did that thing. That's kind of universalizing a thing. I don't personally agree with the categorical imperative. I'm a utilitarian. However, it definitely makes for an interesting discussion. And I would share my screen, but I don't think Rufus is back, so I could probably take a screenshot of this. There you are.
I'm back.
That was perfect timing.
So I was obviously gone. Did you delineate the difference between ontology and deontology?
Oh no, I haven't actually. I should do that. So deontology has little to do with ontology. Ontology is kind of like the study of what is, whereas epistemology is the study of like what you know. Ontology is kind of the direct existence rather than the knowledge of existence and the justification for that and all of that. So yeah, ontology is has to do with like what you I guess what exists, whereas deontology is an ethical framework. It's two completely different concepts. They just happen to share a similar name.
Right. Yeah, that's important.
That is important, yeah.
That's a really because some people might be familiar with ontology,
Yeah, that's definitely
and that
true.
because for me, I like just this week. It was only this week that you introduced me to deontology, and my
Yeah.
first thought was the opposite of ontology, and it's absolutely not what it is.
No, yeah. It's just not.
Yeah, so for me, literally this week, just this week, I was introduced to deontology.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting position for sure.
Did you you're still sharing your screen. Why don't you bring up something to look at?
I'm not actually. I should do though.
Oh, I'm sharing a screenshot is what I'm doing. There we go.
Yeah.
There it is. There's deontology. Okay, so there's something for people to look at and read. Deontology is an ethical theory that uses rules to distinguish right from wrong, which is completely, absolutely separate from existence, which it would be ontology.
Right, right. Yeah, it's a
Deontology is
normative rather than descriptive theory.
Immanuel Kant. Deontology
Yeah, it
is
has a
often
lot to do with Kantism.
associated with Immanuel Kant. Kant believed that ethical actions follow universal moral laws such as don't lie, don't steal, don't cheat.
As opposed to focusing to the consequences of those things and trying to maximize certain consequences or minimize certain consequences. Yeah,
Okay, well, let's have a little bit of fun.
sure.
As
We
I
should hang on before we do. I should probably explain what I meant when I said that's a normative theory rather than a descriptive one. Normative is basically it means it has to do with what is right and wrong, whereas descriptive has to do with what is just in general. Um, so it's kind of
It's the is
that's
ought.
used a lot in philosophy.
It's the is ought question.
Yes.
So Kant believed that ethical actions follow universal moral laws,
Yes.
such as don't lie, don't steal, don't cheat.
Now, deontology, I don't think deontology necessarily believes in objective universal laws. I'm not sure if a deontologist would necessarily believe in universal laws, whether they be subjective or objective, because they
They,
do
I,
universalize certain rules.
I would argue that they have to be subjective. I think.
Well,
I mean, if I'm reading this last sentence in the first paragraph, Kant believed that ethical actions follow universal moral laws such as don't lie, don't steal, don't cheat.
right.
But they're not universal. They're not.
Well, he's using universal differently. Like he's not using it to mean objective, I'm pretty sure. Because when it comes to deontology, people universalize certain rules in the sense that like they try to imagine what would happen if everyone steal, if everyone stole, if everyone killed, if everyone did these certain things, and then say whether that's good or bad based on that fact. That's
Well,
the categorical imperative.
my mind automatically goes to the natural world in the animal kingdom because lying, cheating, and stealing is a natural behavior that exists within the natural world of animals, right?
Well, I mean, I don't know many animals that lie to each other, but sure,
I do.
really.
Yeah, yeah.
Go on, I'm all ears.
Well, dogs lie to each other and they lie to their owners. But more specifically,
That's fair. That's fair.
more specifically, there's a bird. I forget the name of the bird or the specific breed or species.
Yeah.
I think it's in Africa. I think where this bird puts out a call. It's an alarm call, right? The bird sees a predator bird like a hawk or a falcon in the air, and it puts out an alarm call, and all the critters have come to recognize this alarm call, including the bird, the species of bird, but other critters like um, like meerkats have
Hmm.
recognized the sound of this alarm call, and they all recognize it as, oh my God, alarm! Everybody hide and take cover.
Yeah.
So there's a bird that puts out an alarm call, and when it puts out that alarm call, all critters that recognize that call, not just the bird species, but other critters like meerkats and things, they all take cover. Now,
Yeah.
this bird, when it sees a predator, puts out the alarm call and everybody takes cover and everyone's safe. That's fine. But In the morning, when the meerkats wake up and they go rummaging and scrounging for grubs and breakfast, a meerkat might dig up a big, juicy grub worm, right?
Hmm.
A big beetle larvae or something that he digs out of a fucking root ball or something. And there's a bird who will be nearby and he'll be observing and he'll watch this meerkat and as soon as the meerkat finds a fucking grub worm, the bird puts out the alarm call and everybody scrambles for cover and then the bird swoops in and gets breakfast because the meerkat dug up the grub worm. Now the bird has the grub worm because everybody
Yeah.
ran for cover and the bird just fucking lied to everyone, just deceived everyone, and now he
Well, I'm going to be pedantic here and say that's misleading, not lying. But I imagine a deontologist would likely be against misleading as well for the most part. So
well, I
it
mean,
still applies. However,
that's a
there is
lie.
another
It's a
objection I
lie.
have.
You can't. All right, now you have
Well,
to
no,
do.
misleading isn't necessarily lying.
No, it's the same as lying. Misleading is
Oh,
the
of course,
same.
of course.
No, you're gonna be. You want to be a pedantic asshole? I'm gonna be a pedantic asshole. Misleading is the same as lying. What's the difference?
I'm gonna look up the
He's gonna
definitions.
look it up. Here he goes defending his position with Wikipedia. Come on.
Or wordnik in this case. Okay, let's see. To blah blah
To
blah.
deceive is deception. Deception is a lie. That's a lie. You lying liar who lies.
Hang on, hang on. To speak untruthfully with intent to mislead or deceive. So that would involve speaking. Misleading would merely be to lead in the wrong direction or to give the wrong impression. But of course, that was one definition. I can look at others.
You're
Lie,
you're you're
present.
you're
No.
actually working hard to tell me that there's a difference between deception and lying.
Yes, yes, I am.
Good luck. Good luck.
It's not much of a difference, but it is a difference, I believe. We're supposed to blah blah blah.
I'll wait. Do do
To
do
say
do.
or write something that is not true in order to deceive someone.
Something that's not
That's
true.
the second definition, which involves speaking
Yeah, that means lie.
or writing.
Lie.
That's this definition, so lying necessarily involves those things. So, whereas
Uh,
misleading would not,
you're gonna
from what I
lose. You're
from what I
losing this argument. You're not doing good. You're not doing good.
I've got to hang on. I can post them. I've got 2-1 on
All
you
right.
as far as lying
All
goes.
right. 2-1. What? How? What?
Yeah, I've got two definitions for involving speaking and writing, which a bird could not do.
That's irrelevant. That's irrelevant. Whether speaking has nothing. Oh, that's not true. By the way, when a bird goes chirp chirp, that's speaking. Okay, so no shot.
Oh,
Okay, shot that one down.
I'm gonna look up the definition of speak now.
Come on,
To produce
you're on a
words by means of
you're
sounds.
on thin ice, my feathered friend.
All right, I've got one here. Hang on. So that's one definition of
Oh,
speak.
oh, and by the way, I'm caring,
Yes.
I'm caring for my mom's bird. You know this, right? My mom has an
Yeah.
African gray parrot
Hmm.
who can speak, who can not only speak words but can put words together on her own to make her own sentences. And she can not only do that, but she can do it in my voice, my mom's voice, and my brother's voice. And me and my brother
Fantastic.
and our voices, my brother and I, are very, very similar, but very slightly different. This bird can delineate and differentiate and make sounds and words in my voice, my mom's voice, and she can put words together to make her own sentences, and most of the time they make sense. It's crazy. Go sit on a dog, that kind of thing.
That's crazy.
It's like, from this phrase she learned, go sit here, to dog and other phrases and words that she knows, she starts putting words together that she knows, and she makes sentences that make hilarious fucking sense.
Yeah.
It's funny when she does it, but they make sense. But that's it's it's still speaking. Any verbalization, like an alarm code, even if a bird only does, tweet, 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 which means alarm, 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 that's still a verbalization. That's still speaking.
Well, would you agree tweeting, like the tweets are not words? Would you agree there?
No,
Oh boy.
no, no. Any verbalization would be the equivalent to a word or communication or language.
Um, it appears you're correct by the first definition.
Dolphins have language. Whales have language. Dogs have language. Cats have language. Birds have language. Anything that can verbalize has language. There's meaning behind the sounds that they make.
I've got to admit it. By the definitions I'm looking at, word is in fact that would in fact be a word.
Fucking A. I win.
All right, fine, fine.
I
I
win.
concede. There's no
All right.
difference between
You
lie
you heard it
and
here first.
mislead.
You heard it here first. Verb concedes.
I do.
I win.
It's a sad day.
It's a sad day for Ferb. You lost this argument. No, seriously, any verbalization is the equivalent to a word or language. If it's understood by any other creature, then it could be considered
I concede.
okay, I'll shut up. I win.
However, I win in the end because your argument is an appeal to nature.
Oh, 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 you're killing me. Make your appeal to nature. Make your claims seem more true by drawing a comparison with the good, quote, good natural world. Quote, of
Because
course.
your original argument was that they basically like nature lies, and
Oh,
therefore
oh,
you're drawing a moral conclusion
oh,
from that.
oh, 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 me in the back with my hand up. Ooh, ooh, ooh.
Yes.
The quotation at the bottom, the example,
Hmm.
it says, quote, of course homosexuality is
Oh yeah,
unnatural. You don't see
that's not only an
same-sex
invalid but
animals.
also unsound
That's
argument.
correct. It's false. We do see same-sex animals capitulating. We see this absolutely.
Hmm.
It's dominance. It's a dominant thing. It may or may not be attributed to actual, same-sex attraction, right?
Yep.
But we do. It's a false equivalency. Aha! Appeal to nature is a false equivalency fallacy.
Well, no, no, no. That's just about the one example. Is the problem.
That's a poor example. Yeah, fail. What else you got?
Let's
All
see.
right, all right.
Blah, blah, blah. Here we go. This I hang on.
What we got? What's this? You argue that something because something is natural, it is therefore valid, justified, inevitable, good, or ideal.
Right, right.
Many, quote, natural things are also considered good. Well, I mean, many, yes, many, not all. Um,
Yeah.
and this can bias our thinking, yes, it can, but naturalness itself doesn't make something good or bad. That's true. For instance, murder could be seen as very natural. That is true. But that doesn't mean it's good or justifiable. Um,
Hmm. You can't conclude that it's good or justifiable from that premise. It
correct.
doesn't mean it's not good or
That's correct.
justifiable.
That is correct. Example, the medicine man rolled into town on his bandwagon offering various natural remedies, such as very special plain water. Special. Special plain? Okay, that's a contradiction. Special plain water? If it's plain water, it's plain water. Is it special? Is it special? It's special plain water.
Maybe it's especially plain.
He said that it was only natural that people should be wary of artificial medicines such as antibiotics. Well,
And here the
um,
example would be trying to
oh,
hang on. I
and
know what you're going to
no,
say there. I know what you're going to say
oh,
there.
you know what I'm gonna say.
I know. But the example is trying to say that it's bad because it's artificial, therefore fallacy. That it could not, it would more commonly be interpreted a different way. So that's not the best example either.
Yeah, that's another.
But you get the
Mm,
definition of the fallacy nonetheless.
okay. Well, without the example muddies the water.
It does. It does.
The
It does.
definition is a good definition.
Okay.
I'll just leave that one there.
So you remember you recall why I'm saying this, right?
Yeah.
Because you made the argument that we were talking about deontology. I forget exactly how this
Well,
arose.
we got into language and animal sounds, right? Are they
Right, but
language?
before all of that, when we were still at the deontology part, somehow we transitioned from that to bird sounds. That right, so it was the deceiving thing. You read in the deontology that one of the examples of something which they would consider an immoral rule was stuff like murder and lying. And then you said, well, animals lie, and that
They
would not
steal.
work as a counter argument to
They
their
do.
position
They do.
because
They do
appeal to
all.
nature.
Well, they do all of the above. They lie. They cheat, and they steal. Animals do this.
Right, right. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's good or bad. To say that it would necessarily mean it's good or bad would be that
Well, I
fallacy.
was literally arguing against Kant's stance that he believed that ethical actions follow universal moral laws.
Right, but he doesn't universalize those across the animal kingdom.
Well, he didn't specify animal kingdom. He says the universal moral laws such as don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal.
That's fair. That's fair. The page should have gone into more
He
detail on what
yeah,
universalizing really
Kant
meant.
apparently according to this Kant doesn't specify, but I'm telling you that in the animal kingdom, according to universal quote moral laws, that's just not true.
Well, what it means by universal, as far as I'm aware, is basically applied to every human.
Okay. Okay, so we're going to what's the word we're going to add to Kant's description whereas he didn't delineate.
He might delineate in like some of his books. I'm sure he does at some point. I'm sure I've read this somewhere.
It just require a quote here. It just requires that people follow the rules and do their duty. Oh, I don't love that. I don't love those words at all.
I know.
This approach tends to fit well with our natural intuition about what is or isn't ethical. See, I have issues with that as well. Um,
I would probably not disagree with that because we have like a natural intuition not to kill and stuff like that, and that's a rule rather than not to do something which would cause more harm. And if killing happens to cause, usually we don't have an intuition that goes that deep.
mm, I might argue against that as well.
Oh,
We do have a natural intuition to kill. I mean,
mm, I
humans.
don't.
I mean, if we
I mean, we have an intuition to kill under certain situations,
sure,
but the certain situations aren't, aligning with consequentialist things. And we kind of have like an ethical intuition against it, I would argue.
um, well, I don't know about that. I think there's an argument to be made against that. And
I'm sure.
I'm thinking about like Native American tribes who didn't necessarily have this philosophical understanding. They just ran on nature and intuition. And when they ran across someone who was on their land who was outside of their skin color and outside of their tribe, that they would maybe just naturally kill that person.
That's true. That would be against. Let me think about that. That dehumanization, would that be an intuition or a natural intuition? I don't know. I think it would depend on how you define nature or natural.
Yeah, it would depend on the definition of nature and natural.
Because you could argue that's like learned behavior from the harshness of
Right.
nature, or you could say,
I was gonna say cultural. So yeah.
yeah, yeah, or cultural.
Yeah. So I mean, there's arguments.
Complicated issue.
That was a good complicated issue. Absolutely.
So I sent you a quote which explains the universalization process. It says where all people necessarily acted in this way in the relevant
Okay.
circumstances.
So they specialized or they specified. Let me see. What we had. Let me. Oops. I can't open. There we go. I can expand that a little bit so everybody can see. Attempt to universalize the maxim by imagining a world where all people necessarily acted in this way in the relevant circumstance. Okay, so now we have another muddy water here. Relevant circumstances. What the fuck does that mean?
So that would be like
The relevant
if you
circumstances.
say that
Hey,
you
I'm out
kill
here
everyone
hunting.
who gets on your property. That would be like you're looking at this principle, this
So
rule,
so
which is
I'm
that you kill everyone on your property. If everyone did that, that would, because you're saying killing someone in the relevant circumstance, which is when they're on your property, I think is what that means.
yeah, but okay. I'm thinking in a situation once again. I'm thinking like Native Americans, right? On the
Hmm.
plains, uninterrupted by Cortez or, Columbus, just Native Americans doing Native American things, right? They have their lands. These are our lands. We hunt, we live. This is how we survive. And who the fuck are you? Kill.
Yeah,
Because if somebody else shows up on my land, that means you're going to be taking my resources.
right,
That deer that you just killed would have fed my tribe.
right,
But now I'm looking around and there's no fucking deer because you scared them all away. You killed the only deer available. You're not going to walk away with my food. That's my food. That's my deer. It's on my land. And my tribe, my family depends on it. So I'm going to kill you because you're threatening my survival. So would that,
right. So then the relevant situation would be when you're threatening survival or when you're on someone else's land.
yeah, and that would also fall into intuition, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Because, I mean, you want to consider all the backstory. I mean, that's my deer. It's on my property. My tribe needs that. We need to survive. We're hungry.
Hmm.
And fuck you. Who the fuck are you? So,
But a deontologist, as far as I'm aware, would claim that like the rule is valid because of the conclusion gained from the universalization, not because of the immediate consequence to any specific case.
oh,
Or so to not even immediate. It would just be consequence overall long term.
yeah, it would be immediate. It would be upfront. But of course, there are so many examples of tribes, independent, differentiating tribes working together. It's like, oh, you got some deer meat, I got some fish. How about you give me that deer leg and I'll throw you a couple of fish and we don't kill each other.
Hmm.
That way I go home with some deer and some fish and you go home with some deer and some fish and we all go home. Nobody fucking
Yeah,
dies. So there's a lot of, you know, I hate to say the word, but communitarianism, right? We're working together.
yeah,
Even though people would run into each other in the plains of America or Africa or wherever, tribes, groups would run into each other, bump into each other, and they would discover that, oh, you're on my land, and I see that you have caught fish out of my river.
yeah,
And instead, we can do one of two things. You give me some fish, I'll give you some deer meat, and or the alternative is that we fight and whoever survives, winner take all.
right,
And then, you go home with one or two or three less people, and I go home with a couple of less people. I would rather go home with all my people, a couple of fish and some deer. You go home with all your people, some fish and some deer, and
right.
we don't fucking fight.
So then you consider that on a consequentialist framework, on a deontologist framework,
You,
and
you could call
yeah.
that utilitarianism. You could call it all kind of things.
Well, it would really depend on what method you use to come to that conclusion that would define the ethical framework. Because I think you could come to that conclusion via both methods. It would be different types of dilemmas which would test different things.
Sure. Okay, so we did get into a couple of tangents,
Yes.
but
Very big tangents,
I
yes.
think we covered some good ground, and we're getting close to about an hour and a half.
Hmm.
How about we think about wrapping this up, and we think about our next show or discussion topic?
Yeah.
So we were starting off with axioms,
Yeah.
um, which we can all agree are basically agreed upon conclusions.
Hmm. Well, I'm still reluctant to add the agreed upon part, but the foundational principles.
So where was it? Let me see. You dropped a whole bunch of stuff. Oops, let me go back. Uh, Logical absolutes. We have the law of identity, law of non-contradiction, law of excluded middle. These are important concepts for people to understand.
Hmm. I'd agree. I mean, no matter what. Well, I don't know. I guess I can't conclude that it would be important for them to understand it if they work off of a different presuppositional framework, which doesn't have the same seed to come to the same conclusions on importance that mine does. So, I mean, to me, it's important that they learn this, but is it to them? I guess only they can decide.
Yeah. Um, when I look at the law of identity and this particular description, something that is what it is and isn't what it is not.
Hmm.
Something that is what it is and
Isn't what it is not is yeah.
that
It's
that
same.
that
It's
that is
double negative.
that's is what it is. That's not descriptive. And isn't what it is not. That's even less descriptive.
Well, it is descriptive, but I mean, it's such an abstract topic that it seems undescriptive because it's almost seems like so obvious that why would you ever state that? But it is an axiom, so you have to state it essentially.
So the example, a cloud is a cloud, not a rock. A fish is a fish, not a car.
Hmm.
Okay, well that's fair enough. That's not abstract. We can conclude that a fish is a fish. It's not a car. But
Hmm.
but is it a cat? It's not a car. We can conclude based on this axiom, a fish is a fish.
Right.
It's not a car.
Well, okay, this is
But what
conflating like
it doesn't describe what these things are. The law of identity,
well, the law of identity isn't meaning to describe what the thing is. It's just a logical principle. So like there's also another conflation here. So there's like a rose is a flower, but a flower is not necessarily a rose.
right?
Um, but a rose, okay, it's in the category of flower, but it's not in itself the category of flower. So when we're talking about the law of identity and what things are as far as categories go, we've got to be careful not to make that conflation. The law
Right,
of identity would say that a rose is not a flower in the sense that it is not the category of flower, but it is inside of the category of flower.
right.
So that doesn't contradict the law of identity. You just have to be careful to account for that.
Yeah, so the law of identity is actually kind of a slippery slope, a little bit.
No, it's just you got to be careful and know what you're talking about.
Okay. So the law of non-contradiction, something cannot be both true and false at the same time. So this is where I mentioned cognitive dissonance. People hold two conflicting ideas at the same time.
Right, right. Yep.
So the example is to say that a cloud is not a cloud would be a contradiction since it would violate the first law, blah, blah, blah. The cloud cannot be what it is and not what it is at the same time. Can't be both. Just like you said,
Mhm.
um, a a rose is a flower, but a flower is not necessarily a rose.
Well, I don't think that would be the same concept.
Well, a cloud cannot be what it is and it is not at the same time.
It'd be more so
So
like
a
a rose
flower
is a
can't.
rose. It
A,
is it, it isn't not a rose.
a flower is
Well, no,
not.
that would be the first one, wouldn't it?
Yeah. So a flower is a flower. A flower is a
Oh,
flower.
because it has to do with true and false,
So a flower can be a
right?
rose, but it's not guaranteed to be a rose.
Wait, the law of identity. Oh God, this is why we should have looked into this more before I start talking. Okay, so something is what it is and isn't what it is not. Okay, it not being what it is not, is that including the law of non-contradiction implicitly?
No.
No, because it's talking about ontology, whereas the law of non-contradiction goes beyond ontology.
Right.
That makes sense.
So the law of excluded middle, which is really probably more important than the other two. A statement is either true or false without a middle
I wouldn't
ground.
necessarily say more important, but it is very important. Because I mean, if you don't have the law of identity, how can you even understand like language? I could say a word and you could say that word isn't that word, and we would just get nowhere.
Well, I mean, yeah, if English was my second language, we could argue over words all day long.
Well, I'm saying even if it was your first language, if you didn't accept the law of identity, you could just deny whatever conclusion I say because you deny the law of identity.
I mean, I could, but we would have to, we would have to agree on definitions, which would encompass the law of identity, right? If
Um,
we agreed on definitions, is a cloud? What is a cloud to you? A cloud is a fluffy white thing that I observe in the sky. Now, a fluffy white thing in the sky. Uh-oh, I lost Ferb. Okay, he's back. Are you back? I don't have your audio. I can't hear you.
apparently
There you are.
disconnected temporarily again. Not sure what's going on, but here I am.
We didn't miss much. So, is a cloud? Can we agree that a cloud is a fluffy white thing that I observe in the sky? No.
As long as the law of identity is true.
Well, no, because there are other fluffy white things that I might observe in the sky.
Um, well, yeah, that's true. That's it's just the problem of not coming up with a verbose enough definition.
So, the law of identity really depends a lot on definitions.
Well, because you're talking about
Well,
no, it wouldn't. It wouldn't because
let me give you an
the
example. Let me give you an example.
okay.
On here in the law of identity, it says, for example, a cloud is a cloud, not a rock. I could actually argue the opposite. I could say that a rock is indeed a cloud because meteors, when they strike the Earth's atmosphere, they vaporize and they leave a trail that looks like a cloud, and it came from a rock. And the constituent particles that make up that
Well,
quote
no, 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 no.
cloud.
Hang on. We're talking about different formations of particles. It can have all the same particles, all the same. Well, it has different properties. It's really the properties of the category of particles that we call something like a cloud, which defines it as a cloud.
Okay,
It's not the fundamental principle of the
so we
particles
can agree
themselves.
that a cloud is made of water vapor. Can we?
Yes.
Okay, so water vapor also makes up the ocean.
Hmm.
So is a cloud the ocean?
No, because a cloud is more than just water vapor. It's water vapor that's formed, in a, I guess, what would you call it? Yeah, us just look up definition.
Google help.
A visible body of very fine water droplets or ice particles suspended in the atmosphere at altitudes ranging up to several miles above sea level.
Cool. Water vapor, ice particles. Um, the ocean is
Mhm.
made up of water vapor and ice particles.
Right, but this is suspended in the atmosphere at
Okay.
altitudes ranging up to several miles above sea
Okay.
level.
All right. Specifically suspended in the atmosphere. Okay.
Yep. So that's, yeah.
So
And
is
if it were, well, go on.
so is a cloud the ocean or is an ocean the cloud?
Well, I mean, we can look up an ocean definition if you want. An ocean is the entire body of saltwater that covers more than 70% of the Earth's surface.
Yada yada yada. Get on to the more specific definition.
Any of the principal divisions of the ocean, including the Atlantic, Pacific, Indian, Arctic, and Southern Oceans.
Any better?
The body of water which envelops the Earth and covers almost three-fourths of its surface with a mean depth, as nearly as can be estimated at the present time, of less than 12,500 feet.
So it's a body of water.
Yes.
Is a cloud a body of water?
Um, I'm not entirely sure if it would be a
Gotcha.
body of water.
Gotcha.
However, the cloud has a more specific definition. So a cloud is
Yes.
more than
Uh,
ocean, even if it would be ocean
I
by one of
know.
those
I'm just
definitions.
playing. I'm just playing.
And I guess you could argue that it envelops the Earth in more than 70% of the Earth's surface.
So, without knowing the science behind what a cloud is, right?
Yeah,
That it's, molecular atomized particles of water.
right. It would
Without
just be like that
it
white slash gray fluffy thing in the
it
sky.
would be a white fluffy thing that I observe in the sky, which I could also attribute to a meteor because as
Um,
it enters the atmosphere, it leaves a cloud, a white fluffy thing as it
right, but it
enters.
wouldn't be the meteor itself. It would be the meteor trail,
No, but the
which you would be
meteor
attributing to
trail
that.
would be made up of particles of the meteor, which is a rock,
Well, it would be, but
which
it
are
still wouldn't be
atomized
the meteor
particles,
itself.
of the rock as it vaporizes.
All right. Let me.
And
We're
to
gonna
me,
bring
on the
thesis
Earth,
ship into
not
this.
knowing the science, as I observe in the sky, there's this white fluffy thing left over by a meteor, and that white fluffy thing is nothing more than particles of
Hang
silica.
on, hang on, hang on. You're familiar with the ship of Theseus, right? Or
Oh God,
Theseus?
not very, only slightly.
Okay, so it's a ship. The example is that you take
Oh,
apart the
you
ship
take apart the ship and you rebuild
one
it,
plank at a time and
and
re-put the new plank
when
in.
does it become the same ship?
Or when does it become a different ship? Or is it
Mm-hmm.
ever a different ship?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if you take a ship, let's say Theseus ship, and you take apart all of its planks, you grind them up and turn them into pencils. Okay? Are the pencils a ship?
Well,
And I
certainly.
would argue no, because they don't have any of the same properties that a ship has. It's all the same materials, all the same stuff. I mean, you added lead, but you get the idea. It's basically, yeah, or pencil lead. You get the idea.
That's graphene.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So a meteor crashing through the atmosphere, leaving a cloud behind it. The
It doesn't mean a meteor is a cloud.
No, but the cloud is still, from my observation, a white
It is
fluff.
still a
It's
cloud.
still a
It
white
would still
fluffy
be
thing that lingers in the sky.
it would still be a cloud,
It would be a cloud.
and that wouldn't be a problem, I don't think. So I don't think
All
it
right,
would be.
we're getting in the weeds. Let's wrap this
We
up.
are.
Let's wrap this up. I think this was a pretty good discussion. We got some good foundational stuff going on.
Yeah. We went a bit all over the place, but it's probably what we're going to continue to do.
That's what we do, man. It's cool. Let's go ahead and wrap this up. You want to drop a final thought or anything? Let's call this a day. I think
um
this is a pretty good start.
yeah, I don't think I have a whole lot to add to all that.
Okay. Well, thanks everybody for checking out the video, and I hope you enjoyed this discussion. There's a lot more to come. Ferb and I get into really amazing discussions every time we chat, and we always wind up challenging each other on definitions, crazy definitions, like definitions you wouldn't expect, like we just did, right?
Lie and deceive, yeah.
what's the definition of a fucking cloud? I mean, ser-
Cloud and ocean.
like seriously. Yeah, so that's why we're pedantic assholes. But hey, I'm glad you checked us out, and thanks everybody for thanks, buddy.
Yeah,
I look forward to more discussions like this, and as soon as we get 100 subscribers, we can start doing this stuff live.
yep. So farewell.
All right, buddy. Fare thee well, my friend, and we'll do this again.
Yeah.
Bye.